Two sex offenders are beaten to death after contracts are put on their heads. In Nebraska, a riot popped off to where the inmates took control of the prison, broke down the wall protecting the sex offenders in their little protective custody wing. And just days before, another sex offender piece of shit told his little chomo friends that they all have hits on their heads and they're coming to collect in the next 48 hours. What took place is something out of a movie. It just shows you, leave our kids alone. Let's get into it. The two inmates that were murdered would be Sean Collins and Donald Peacock. Through all the chaos, no one was charged. Understand the hatred we have towards these chomo piece of shits? Just years ago, half of all inmates murdered in Maine's prison system were convicted of sex offenses. A quarter of Oklahoma's inmates' homicide victims in 10 years bore convictions of sex crime. And a conservative estimate, 75% of murder victims in Nebraska prisons were sex offenders. So you guys understand the hatred we have towards these pieces of shits. The riot went down May 10th, 2015 at Tecumseh State Correctional Institution, a high max prison in Nebraska. The uprising led to a violent melee lasting approximately 2 to 9 hours. Multiple fires, extensive destruction, and a massive damages estimated at over $2 million. Only good news that happened that day was the beating deaths of two inmates convicted of sex offenses, Sean Collins and Donald Peacock, though no one has ever been charged. John Wazinski, a protective custody sex offender survivor of the riot, testified in open court saying, "All you sex offenders are going to die. A lot of people in protective custody had a contract on them." A staff hit list was found graffitied on the walls, suggested contracts extended beyond inmates to staff as well. The riot was pre-planned and coordinated by organizations and gangs. To show you how much we hate child molesters, sex offenders, and rapists, it just shows you the sacrifice that inmates will make to end these sex offenders and erase them off the face of the earth, whether for a contract or whether for righteous reasons or both. When mortal enemies like the Bloods, Riots, and other organizations in prisons that have killed multiple members, have been at war for over 2 decades, agree to wipe these chomos off the face of the earth by taking down walls, climbing through HVAC, and beating them to death with blunt force trauma, their bare hands and locks and socks, you understand how serious we take protecting our children and women from these rapist, chomo, pedophile piece of shits. Where were all the officers, and how did they have so much time to break the walls down and murk these chomos? Well, May 10th, 2015, the Mother's Day uprising. At 2:30 p.m., inmates in the yard in units 2 and 3 refused orders to lock down, igniting and coordinated disturbance. Roughly 400 inmates participated, seizing control of housing units, control rooms, offices, and the gym. Inmates tore down walls, broke windows, covered cameras, barricaded doorways, and thwarted the exit route. Fires were lit inside galleries, yards, smoke-filled control rooms, collapsing ceilings and systems. Brooms, ironing boards, mop handles, laundry carts, even metal bleachers used against the guards. Tower guards fired warning shots. First, one inmate, Rashad Washington, was shot in the leg. Staff retreated into the tower offices and the gym for safety while awaiting tactical response teams. At that time, they would knock down the wall. How the inmates gained access to the protective custody area. The control bubble, or what you call the officer station, was breached when prison staff in fear vacated their posts. The inmates unlocked the larger yard facing the door instead of the small secure yard during the fires, inadvertently letting general population inmates into the protective custody wing. Independent expert analysis confirmed the riot was coordinated by gangs, with inmates intentionally targeting structural lines of defense, walls, doors, cameras, to overwhelm staff. Both inmates were 46 years old, convicted child molesters housed in the protective custody wing. They were discovered beaten to death during the aftermath of the riot. No suspects have ever been charged. Descriptions suggest brutal coordinated assaults by other inmates, but there's no evidence of weapons. Yet investigators concluded defensive wounds indicated barehanded or improvised weapons, aka mop handles, furniture, whatever the fuck they could have, stabbing them, poking them, beating them. The lack of weapon fragment and prevalence of inmate-on-inmate violence suggests shanks or fists, but no official confirmation is available regarding exact method. Staff knew they didn't want to die for these chomos. They retreated very, very early. As soon as the fires came, the smoke and the shanks overwhelmed control rooms and galleries. The commander ordered remaining officers to leave themselves in secure areas for safety. Forced evacuation protocol meant control bubble staff left protective custody zones, unlocking main yard doors instead of small secure exits, allowing general population inmates to flood the protective zone. Yeah, now they were feeling that fear, hiding behind those little walls, and then all of a sudden, their boogeyman, their predators come knocking, and there's no one to save them. They had a little bit of fear, a little bit of taste what those children felt. Inmates started to flood the protective custody zones, while staff was running for their tactical regrouping, as they call it. The one thing they did figure out, though, was the chomos were likely beaten to death by other inmates and not by prison staff, consistent with punches and clubbing. That's what the grand jury came to. Yeah, you guys are doing great. It's the only time I like when the system gets it right or wrong, whatever you want to call it, is when the chomos are hit up and nobody knows what happened. They just think it might have been the inmates, not the officers. Why would that even be a question? You know why. Anyway, so this is how they came to the conclusion of how the entire prison was overrun. When the units were overtaken, once they took over the control centers and galleries of all the units because the staff evacuated because of the thick smoke and fires made it untenable, that's when they vacated and the inmates began. First, they started barricading the windows and doors with mop handles and ironing boards, laundry carts. Some of the inmates grabbed metal bleachers like they were back in the medieval times and ran charge and started busting open the chomos protective unit wing. All the chomos were in there crying, begging, knowing that any second they get through that wall, they're all gonna get slaughtered. If that's not what you call karma or eye for an eye or the universe working itself out, I don't know what else you call it. Between walls in the mini yards, burning ceiling tiles and sheetrock, which collapsed control booths and obliterated surveillance cameras, breaching diving walls, notably the wall separating galleries A and B in Unit 2 was broken through at 3:56 p.m. It became engulfed in flames. These motherfuckers wanted to hit these chomos so bad. They were already warned days before by this piece of shit John Wazinski saying, yeah, a lot of you are gonna die. Yeah, there's contracts on y'all. These dudes came in like the Spartans, like burning bleachers, knocking down walls, knowing that the fire would incinerate some of the wall structure, HVAC settings, and get in there just to kill the chomo. They could have did anything they wanted, try to escape, took officers hostage. Nope, they had one plan and one mission only: kill these child molesters. Testimony from John Wazinski. A lot of people in protective custody had a contract on them, he noted. Doors were flung open to allow general population inmates into protective custody wings, targeting sex offenders as planned. Yet, after all that mayhem, a grand jury will not indict anyone in connection to the killings of the 2 Nebraska Chomo inmates during a prison riot. The Johnson County jury found on April 19th that there was not enough evidence to file charges in the May 10, 2015 killing of Donald Peacock and Sean Collins, who were found dead in their cells, cowered, hiding, begging for their life, scared to death. Wonder how it felt. Probably a little bit like those children, where you were the predators and monsters that they were hiding under their beds from home. Why didn't y'all fight back? Oh, that's right. You're dealing with men. Wouldn't even fight for your own life. You would only attack children. Both men were serving time for child molestation convictions and died of blunt force trauma, beaten to death from shots to the head. Johnson County Attorney Rick Smith said the investigation to the killings continues, and the jury's decision does not mean no one will be charged in the future. Here we are 10 years later, and no one gives a fuck. And they thought that they would change protocol? Check this out. 2 years just after that riot, March 2nd, 2017, another disturbance occurred in Unit 2. About 40 inmates refused cell lockdown. They started fires and destroyed property. Staff isolated the unrest to half the unit, used pepper balls and rubber rounds to contain it. Finally, the emergency response team got control of the prison and cooled it down. Yet, Damian Fitzgerald, serving 310 to 470 years for multiple sexual assaults, robbery, burglary, and weapons charges, was found fatally assaulted. The other victim, Michael Galindo, doing 12 to 21 years for robbery and other related convictions, was found dead, beaten, stabbed over 130 times, smoke inhalation, after assailants set towels on fire and left him in his cell. His murder would actually be solved in December of 2023. Eric Ramos was convicted of first-degree murder. Yet, through all that chaos that went down, the 3 Chomos, child molesting piece of shits, murders were never solved. Stay out. stay free, us.